Welcome back, dear viewers, to my channel, where enchanting tales unfold upon every page. In the crisp, cool air of autumn, as the golden leaves rustle beneath our feet, we step into a new chapter brimming with tension. Today, we shall continue the journey of the hero who has returned after years of separation, only to discover his homeland transformed into a fierce battleground under foreign occupation. In this landscape of ruin and sorrow, will he unsheath his sword to fight, or will he stand by as everything crumbles around him? For Eumenes, returning to the city of Cartier after many years, it seems he has other choices. He does not hurry instead, he ascends a high hill where he can observe all that unfolds below. The army advances into the city like a well-oiled war machine, forming an unbeatable formation. With their long guns raised in synchronized rhythm, the fighting spirit of the Macedonian forces surges with fierce pride and determination. This confident army believes in its strength. Eumenes gazes from afar, his eyes landing on an elderly woman seated on the hillside. She appears to be anxious over something, and he wonders if she has come to the city to visit her son and daughter-in-law. Overjoyed, Eumenes exclaims, "Grandmother, you appear at the perfect moment." Just moments later, before the Macedonian army, a miraculous sight unfolds. The mighty forces advance, and the atmosphere of war reaches its fever pitch. Every suspicious action sent ripples of tension through the ranks of warriors. Yet, amidst the chaos, a young man bearing an elderly woman upon his shoulders moved with an unhurried grace. He glided into the formation of the Macedonian troops like a skilled artist weaving through a bustling crowd. With each confident stride, he effortlessly navigated through the lines, a whispering breeze unperturbed, maintaining his steady rhythm as he drew closer to the city gates. His presence caused no disruption, thus, the warriors had no reason to cast him out. Perhaps it was the protection of the two, yet such a scenario could also sow chaos among the ranks. However, to the elderly woman, the sight was terrifying, as if a mere heartbeat away from collision with the massive spears that could pierce through their fragile existence. Please, let that not come to pass. Fortunately, calamity was averted. Before addressing the old woman, Eumenes had already grasped the patterns of the troops' movements. Yet just as they set foot at the city gates, a new challenge awaited them. In Eumenes' mind, allowing the old woman to venture out would lower the guards' vigilance. He merely needed to play the part of an innocuous passerby to gain entry alongside her. However, the guards were far more cautious than he had anticipated. They had no intention of risking the opening of the gates for the two. The young men had reached the very threshold of the city. What more could they desire? Just as Eumenes was about to utter a word, three figures emerged from behind the ranks, seemingly mirroring the path he had taken. The man at the forefront boasted not only a thick beard, but also a mask adorning his face. Eumenes thought to himself, "This is it, we're doomed." With a visage resembling that of a benevolent hero, who knows how much more difficult it will be to enter the city. Indeed, the city gates were locked more securely than before. The one-eyed man proclaimed himself a merchant visiting Cartier to reconnect with an old friend. Surely, he must contribute something, Eumenes thought. Not hesitating to demand, he rummaged through his belongings. The one-eyed man appeared to be someone of success. Yet, his bag contained nothing but unsellable goods. They intended to bribe the gate guards, but were nearly turned away. Eumenes felt a wave of disappointment wash over him, however. Instead of complaining further, he suddenly seized a jar and called out loudly, "O noble guards of the city, this old woman was once a resident of Cartier, having left her homeland many years prior with her husband. Yet she never forgot her roots. Each year, they not only sent money back to their son who remained here, but also contributed greatly to the city's development, harboring the hope of returning home one day. This had been the sole yearning of the family over the years. Alas, it was unfortunate that he could not fulfill that dream. The family patriarch passed away just a month ago, and even his newborn grandson had not yet had the chance to meet him. All he wished was to request a favor. "Let us return his body to his homeland," the old woman said. "Is he still at home, trimming his toenails?" Just as she was about to adjust her story, she was interrupted by the one-eyed man. He expressed his sorrow, insisting that as long as he enters the city, he will rise again. However, this tragic charade bore no fruit. The city gates remained unmoved, for in the eyes of the people, the safety of the city and its inhabitants was paramount. Individual lives could not compete. Yet Eumenes had foreseen this outcome. He turned away. Stepping into the ranks of the Macedonian army, he recounted the tale he had crafted, word for word. By the time he repeated it for the third time, a young general took notice. Simultaneously, an elderly man at the city gate poked his head through the crack of the door. He waved for Eumenes and the others to hurry inside. Meanwhile, the Macedonian soldiers stood still, silently watching their figures fade into the narrow opening. The old woman felt deeply grateful for Eumenes' assistance and wished to thank him, but he stopped her. He simply declined her gratitude politely before bidding her farewell. At that moment, the one-eyed man approached Eumenes and began to speak. "Young man, listen to me. Faced with the might of the foreign army, the wounded soldiers will undoubtedly prioritize the common good. Empathy alone cannot unlock the gates of the city, but honor can. Whether your tales are true or mere fables matters little. To deny you entry is to acknowledge defeat. Faced with the formidable army of Macedonia, the people of Cartier can do nothing but tremble in fear. Even those who have made significant contributions to this city find their yearning to return to their homeland met with cruel rejection. One cannot be defeated without a fight." The one-eyed man, filled with hope, began to share with Eumenes the true reason for his arrival. "I seek the family of Geronimos. Can you help us find the way?" Upon hearing this name, Eumenes looked surprised. "You seek their son, do you not? His father passed away many years ago." "Is that so? Very well." The one-eyed man nodded, signaling for the protagonist to lead the way. The three followed him closely. As they ascended the slope, the young man noticed someone weaving through the ranks. "Aren't you afraid of being sliced to pieces?" "Of course I am, but I believe Macedonia has no intention of waging war against Cartier." "Why do you say that? In the army beyond the walls, I see no siege equipment whatsoever. Moreover, the spirit of the soldiers does not convey a sense of impending death. This feels more like a mere military display. Compared to mere construction, it seems they only seek to boast. If they truly wish to flaunt their power, wouldn't it be more effective to use you as sacrificial pawns? Once Macedonia aims to conquer Cartier, how could they dare to strike at the very heart of the local populace? Are you serious?" The question posed by this man seems overly elaborate. Eumenes sighed in disdain and continued, "Isn't Cartier a city not under Athens' dominion? Unlike Macedonia, which stands as the principal rival in the struggle for power in Greece, Athens' resources are hardly abundant. Most of their provisions depend on supplies shipped from the Black Sea, and Cartier lies directly along that vital supply route. If Cartier were to betray them, it would be akin to tightening the noose around Athens' throat. Such a crucial matter cannot be taken lightly. Thus, it is no surprise that the king would seek to liquidate assets. Just earlier, I witnessed a commander decked out like a cartoon character. It could be that he is indeed the king of Macedonia." Upon hearing Eumenes' analysis, the one-eyed man's demeanor turned serious. For reasons unknown, a flicker of anger arose within him. Yet, the words he was about to utter bore no relation to those emotions. "Would you care to join me in a pursuit of wealth? No need to answer immediately. I shall give you 3 days to ponder this. In truth, here." Eumenes had begun to harbor suspicions regarding the identity of the one-eyed man. Surely, those familiar with European history would draw certain connections to his identity. But for now, let us return to the unfolding tale, shall we? As the conversation came to a halt, everyone arrived at their destination. To their astonishment, Geronimos' home had transformed into the ruins of Geronimos. It seemed that the only path left for them was to seek out Hegtaios. At the mere mention of this name, Eumenes, who usually wore a calm demeanor, was suddenly engulfed in a flicker of anger. "You know about him too, don't you?" The one-eyed man, who had just been filled with joy moments ago, was now met with a cold dismissal. Behind him, this one-eyed figure continued to repeat the appointment for 3 days later, complete with time and place, yet Eumenes remained utterly oblivious. He slowly stepped into the wreckage of Geronimos' house. The clamor of the bustling street gradually faded into the background. The rusty cup began to reclaim its former luster, shining faintly as if awakening from a long slumber. The missing and damaged parts were slowly being restored and filled. The scattered stones everywhere evoked memories of towering walls and roofs from a bygone era. Reflecting on his childhood, Eumenes realized that this book was the genesis of everything. Thessaly served as a primary source of slaves for the ancient Greek world. Cartier, a colony of Athens, was the final stop for slaves transported from Thessaly to Athens. As the true power behind Cartier, the Eumenes family held dominion over the local slave trade. Young Eumenes had lived a carefree life within the walls of Eumenes' household. His childhood was largely spent in the library, a sanctuary built by his father, not just for knowledge, but to enhance their elegance and provide fodder for conversation with other illustrious figures. It was not merely a passion for reading that transformed the library into Eumenes' private sanctuary. Each time he turned the page, his mind effortlessly soared beyond the confines of reality, entering a vast expanse of worlds yet to be discovered. Existing within this treasury of knowledge was more than sufficient for him to grasp essential wisdom and understand the intricacies of the world. Eumenes believed he no longer needed formal schooling yet. His father remained resolute, leaving him with no choice but to concede. Though he often drifted into daydreams during class, this did not hinder his ability to achieve remarkable grades. Eumenes was truly an outstanding student. In comparison, his younger brother, while charming, lacked the same intellectual prowess. Born into the wealthiest family in the city, he enjoyed the finest educational opportunities life could offer. He was even granted exclusive access to the library's precious resources. With a mind brimming with knowledge, coupled with humility, honesty, and reliability, Eumenes naturally garnered the affection of his peers. Even the most enchanting girl in school shared a uniquely close bond with him. Some are born to be victors in the game of life. Yet despite Eumenes' vibrant childhood, he harbored a small worry. He continually found himself dreaming the same dream: vast meadows, powerful horses, and a band of female warriors surrounded by menacing foes. Though the advantage in numbers lay with the men, their attacks were effortlessly dismantled by the fierce female warriors. In an instant, they became mere souls beneath the blades of these valiant fighters. He could not comprehend why, when the woman's gaze met his heart trembled in fear. His actions abruptly halted, pierced through, violated, and he slowly found himself gasping for breath. The outcome was tragic, a grim fate for one as brave as Eumenes. This haunting image replayed in his mind, yet it hardly stirred his anxiety. He simply yearned to decipher the meaning behind this dream. Thus, he had once confided its contents to a few close ones, like his little girlfriend and his personal slave, Karen. Yet in the end, his doubts remained unresolved. Karen even cautioned young Eumenes to refrain from sharing this with his parents. After all, the notion of a tribe being slaughtered by a maiden was hardly a delightful topic. While Eumenes was a perceptive child, he often found himself in situations that defied his parents' expectations. In these moments, Karen would inevitably face trouble as well, stirring within him a sense of unease. For instance, he frequently engaged in light-hearted conversations with mercenaries involved in the slave trade, their hands stained with blood. After each dialogue, he would be invited into his mother's chamber for tea. However, Eumenes had no intention of changing his ways. Unlike the pampered boys of his age, he could interact with everyone on equal terms, shedding any pretense of arrogance. Yet, this friendly habit of his, sooner or later, it would lead to a great tragedy. In the city of Cartier, there dwelled a family notorious for their usurious ways. Recently, they acquired a most precious possession, a bloodsucker. Eager to flaunt their extravagant air, they reveled in their wealth and power. Without hesitation, they brought the new slave to their street, subjecting him to merciless beatings, trampling upon his dignity, and calling it training. In the tomes Eumenes had perused, there were numerous accounts of the fierce Hegtaios. Known for their martial prowess, the Hegtaios would oftentimes use their enemies' hair as trophies. They would sever the hands of their foes to fashion belts, and even sew garments or flags from human skin. According to the records, the Hegtaios were an exceedingly valiant yet brutal people. However, the bloodsucker Eumenes encountered was a stark contrast to the descriptions found in those ancient texts. He did not present himself as a ferocious conqueror or a tyrant. Instead, he was frail and vulnerable, subjected to humiliation and violence, unable to resist. Moved by either curiosity or compassion, Eumenes found himself compelled to assist the fallen vampire slave before him. Yet, this gesture of empathy was met with rejection. Even when cornered and trampled upon, this proud warrior race had no intention of bowing their heads in acceptance of their fate. At this moment, the young master Eumenes remained blissfully unaware. His unintentional act would soon alter the course of his own destiny entirely. As you witness this, many may perceive our protagonist as a naive fool, but the truth is far more complex. Eumenes possessed extraordinary athletic talent, coupled with unparalleled courage. Yet in the realm of sports, he fell short of his classmate, Nick Kenneth, who boasted innate strength. In a school where youth and brilliance often shine brightly, such prominence seldom leads to good fortune. His radiance quickly captured the attention of a few upperclassmen, who saw fit to exploit their martial arts prowess as an excuse to lure Nick Kenneth and his friends into their private arena. With their imposing physiques and raw strength, they sought to teach the arrogant underclassmen a brutal lesson. Nick's friends stood frozen in fear, too intimidated to speak up, their eyes averted from the savage spectacle. Only Eumenes remained transfixed, absorbing every movement of the upperclassmen. Though they had reduced all his friends to battered forms, the reality was that the opponent's techniques lacked finesse and bore no comparison to the mastery Eumenes envisioned in his dreams. As time passed and the challengers fell one by one, Eumenes boldly proposed to take the place of a substitute. These seniors were not fools. They understood all too well that laying hands on the son of the town's lord would invite grave consequences. Yet, not everyone was destined to bear such repercussions. There was one who stood as an exception. "We do not dare to touch you, but we can summon those who are bold enough to face you." After uttering these words, a few of them departed. Eumenes' older brother, hearing of his younger sibling's remarkable rise, seized this opportunity to repay the favor. The elder brother was filled with uncontainable joy. He had long wished to teach his arrogant younger sibling a lesson. No matter how foolish Europe may be, there's always some training involved, yet, if it lacks seriousness, it amounts to nothing. Stop fighting. Stop fighting. Let it be. I cannot afford to lose face before my friends. Realizing he could not best his younger brother, the elder immediately conceded defeat. Within just 2 minutes, he found himself bested by Eumenes. "Do you want to take a shot, or shall I send someone else in?" "Rest assured, you will win," he said, seeking permission from his brother. The strongest member of the group stepped forward. With a single punch, Eumenes was sent crashing to the ground. This opponent, in both stature and strength, far surpassed his elder brother. Those seated on the sidelines urged Eumenes to quickly bow and apologize, but he remained calm and resolute, disregarding their pleas. Bullies derive their pleasure from tormenting the weak. If you are stronger, their failures will cease. I am not entirely without hope. So how can the weaker side rise to overcome their adversary? Such a scene you have seen countless times in your dreams. Dodge and maintain your stance, then strike at the opponent's vulnerabilities. Eumenes, while defending, expertly observed his adversary's movements, continuously counterattacking their weak points. At last, a single hook determined the victor in this fierce contest. Yet, throughout the struggle, Eumenes remained in a state of heightened focus, his excitement blinding him in a surge of fury. He completely forgot the notion of restraint. It wasn't until the harsh shouts of the onlookers pierced his reverie that he remembered to retract his clenched fist. On his way home, fate led him to cross paths with a bloodsucker. Upon seeing the bruised visage of Eumenes, the fiend couldn't suppress a burst of laughter. For the sake of his friends, he had stood tall against a foe far stronger than himself. For a mere boy in his teens, this was undoubtedly a source of pride. Yet, Eumenes was caught off guard when, upon reaching home, he faced a tirade from his mother. He had believed his older brother had conceded defeat from the outset, only to be blindsided by the realization that his sibling had resorted to a swift thrust to claim victory in their rematch. With the backing of adults, that brother now wore a triumphant grin, cleverly masking his cruelty. The younger brother, battered and bruised, and the older brother, who had shown restraint, received forgiveness. Meanwhile, the act of self-defense was met with scorn. Further explanations bore no fruit, for in the eyes of adults, the logic that Eumenes cared about paled in comparison to their bias. Discontent simmered within him. Though he refrained from lashing out on the spot, he silently resolved never to apologize. At that moment, the library became his sanctuary. However, just as he settled in, an unwelcome guest arrived. His father stepped into the library. Sitting across from Eumenes, his father slowly began to speak. "I've heard about the incident. Your mother struck you, didn't she?" Just as Eumenes was about to explain, his father continued, "You and your brother are both competing. Regardless of who wins or loses, there should be no resentment. Still, even I have never laid a hand on you, my dear son. Returning home with your body bruised, your mother will surely be heartbroken. Do not blame her, you and your brother are not the same. You possess talents and abilities that others lack. However, I hope you understand that although your brother may not have the same gifts, this family will still have someone to carry on its legacy. If anything unfortunate should happen to me in the future, I hope you can continue to care for that brother of yours who seems to be lacking." Indeed, the most powerful man in Cartier did not treat Eumenes like a mere child. He recognized the potential within him. With just a few words, he comforted Eumenes' emotions while clearly articulating his thoughts about the family's future. He made the boy understand his expectations, or perhaps it could be said he grasped his mission. Of course, Eumenes comprehended these words, but at that moment he could not fathom the profound meaning hidden behind them. Before leaving, his father left him with a thought-provoking remark. "Back then, you didn't shed a single tear." A few days later, Eumenes arranged to meet his little girlfriend after school. Before heading out, he instructed the light that blocked his path, Karen, to go home first. Several tens of minutes ago, an unrecognizable old man knocked on the door of the Ye family, pleading with Eumenes' father to quickly close the door. "Your son and a dozen of his henchmen were all killed by a vampire slave, because your son believed that the completed training had unlocked him, so the vampire had just been released. Everyone has been eliminated now, and everyone else is hiding inside. If they are not arrested quickly, it may cause serious problems. Even if Father Manussi intervenes immediately, the worst situation will still happen." The vampire slave originally planned to rush out, but found that the gate was already closed. He was forced to go back and find an escape route, fleeing to the most crowded place, possibly to create even greater chaos. Luxury cars crowded in front of real vampire warriors, and the militia were just ordinary soldiers who had not figured out what had happened before turning into lifeless corpses. In the blink of an eye, those who were once joyfully shopping became mere living shields, ruthlessly struck down by those who were meant to protect them. The square transformed instantly into a battlefield, as the bloodsuckers seized every opportunity amidst the chaotic throng of humanity. The militia relentlessly launched deadly assaults, and one by one, they all fell to the ground. Before long, the hottest commodity in the market turned into rotting corpses. The citizens who had retreated to the edges of the square, believing they were safe, found themselves halted in shock. They became mere witnesses to the unfolding tragedy. Never had they witnessed such a disparity. Even a throng of people was easily defeated. Amidst the crowd, the image of Eumenes emerged, a witness to the horror. He had never seen death so easily. It was as if he were drowning in his own thoughts. With true danger looming, Eumenes' curiosity overwhelmed his fear. He failed to grasp that he had not bought a ticket to the summit, but rather a pass to a bloodbath. Even as the bloodsuckers, skilled in their brutal craft, painted the ground crimson, Eumenes felt an oddly nostalgic sensation wash over him. Yet, an inexplicable wave of nostalgia surged unexpectedly within him. The militia was truly no match for the enslaved. Their existence hinged solely on when they would charge forth. The last surviving militia member, clearly the wisest among them, found himself consumed by panic. It was as if he were desperately trying to escape the clutches of death, retreating hurriedly, grasping at anything around him as makeshift weapons. At this moment, the forgotten dread flooded his entire being. "Oh, brothers, please save me. I am utterly worthless in this fight." Eumenes cursed inwardly, yet his lips remained sealed, unable to utter a single sound. Indeed, in this dire circumstance, Eumenes was far from legendary. For the first time, Eumenes felt the chilling breath of death creeping closer. The once dormant fear now engulfed him entirely. I cannot be the shield on this path, he berated himself silently, yet his lips betrayed him, failing to voice his anguish. In truth, under these harrowing conditions, Eumenes was no invincible hero. Forgotten terror surged through him once more, an overwhelming tide. "Oh, brothers, how did I end up here?" Eumenes scolded himself in the depths of his mind, yet not a word escaped his lips. Truly, in this precarious moment, Eumenes was far from immortal. One could only liken him to a feeble sapling, and how could such a fragile being withstand the onslaught of a champion as Gralis? Yet in truth, he was merely a common soldier, stripped of his ideals. It was beyond his capacity to transcend his role. All he could do was tremble in fear. A swift strike from the militia severed the soldier's head with a clean cut, sending it crashing to the ground. Blood sprayed forth, splattering Eumenes' face. Upon witnessing the familiar form of his little friend, the bloodsuckers remained utterly unfazed. The blade rose again, and with another decisive swing, the militiaman's head was neatly severed and fell lifelessly to the earth. Blood gushed forth, staining Eumenes. As he beheld his own image reflected on the ground, the expression of the bloodsucker betrayed no hint of emotion. He merely probed for a moment before swiftly turning to flee from the square. Clearly, he had no intention of harming the child, the only one who had ever shown him kindness. Shortly thereafter, the regular army arrived at the scene, following the trail of blood in pursuit of the fleeing troublemaker. He prayed silently, hoping that she had not been swept up in the chaos that had just unfolded. As he wandered restlessly between the marketplace and his girlfriend's house, Eumenes finally received word that she was safe. Yet, it came with a single, simple message. In his heart, he continued to pray, wishing fervently that she had not been caught in the turmoil that had erupted. Between the bustling market and the safety of her home, Eumenes paced back and forth, and at long last, he received a message confirming her safety. But it was only a brief note. The sky had completely darkened. Eumenes intended to return home immediately, but was informed that the nearest road had been blocked. To avoid trouble and danger, he should have taken a detour around these areas, yet Eumenes found himself unable to restrain his impulses. As he walked along, he stumbled upon several corpses. It was unfathomable that the blood-sucking slave could continue his gruesome rampage in such a dire state. Even the regular army could only line up to endure their fate. More bodies appeared along the path. It was astonishing that the two bloodsuckers could persist in their divine slaughter despite their extreme conditions. Even the official army had to wait in line for their turn. Eumenes surveyed the lifeless bodies and pools of blood, searching for a way forward. Finally, beside a small grove on the outskirts, the sight of a struggling bloodsucker emerged. He lay on the ground, his body covered in wounds. As Eumenes contemplated the oath of life and death he had taken, the Shisha swiftly lifted his upper body. Alert, he cast his gaze toward Eumenes. The moment their eyes met, the look in the Shisha's eyes softened, only for him to collapse once more. Eumenes hesitated, unwilling to approach and confirm his fate. Deep down, he understood. This slave was the enemy of this city, and he lacked the strength, both physically and morally, to save him. After a moment of hesitation, he resolved to retrace his steps. On his way back, he unexpectedly encountered Karen, who was searching frantically. Karen sighed with relief, saying, "Are you all right?" "Thank goodness." Eumenes felt a twinge of guilt as he noticed each clap of applause from Karen. Upon returning home, his mother immediately rushed to call the police, and Eumenes could see the sheer worry etched on her face. Beyond managing the emergency meeting, his father had also gathered everyone. As a trusted ally of Hegtaios, he often visited the Yarrow family, and now their bodyguards remained in the house to ensure everyone's safety. Simultaneously, they tackled business affairs. When everyone returned inside, Eumenes approached Heg to discuss the fate of the slave Shisha. Despite feeling a flicker of empathy for Shisha, who fought valiantly for freedom, that image struck a deep chord within him. He didn't want to see him perish in such a manner yet. Ultimately, Eumenes chose reason, realizing that there seemed to be no saving grace left. Moreover, as a citizen of Cartier, it was his duty to inform the elders about Sanfan's whereabouts. Failing to do so could jeopardize many others. Hearing Eumenes' words, Heg was taken aback. "You've done well, let me handle the rest. I'll inform your father promptly." With a comforting pat on Eumenes' shoulder, Heg turned on his heel and walked away. At last, it seemed everything was reaching its conclusion. Eumenes dragged his weary body to bed and swiftly fell into a deep slumber. This night's dreams were unlike any before. A horse, tightly bound, seemed to whisper the call of freedom. Before midnight struck, Eumenes awoke suddenly. Unable to sleep, he decided to rise and take a walk. It wasn't long before sounds from the courtyard caught his attention. It was the voices of Heg and the guards. Only when he stepped into the yard did Eumenes realize the grim reality. There was something lying on the ground. Upon closer inspection, it was the lifeless body of his father. Heg immediately noticed Eumenes' voice. He turned around, his expression grave, and spoke. "Young master, you are being watched." He then pointed to another body beside the guard. It was the bloodsucker. Eumenes instantly grasped Heg's meaning. The Shisha had returned home, and his father had unfortunately become a victim. Hearing the commotion, the guards rushed over. They knew who the culprit was, but it was already too late. The sudden death of his father left his mother reeling from the shock. The two brothers wept in their sorrow, but the grief did not stop Eumenes from pondering. This was utterly illogical. He raised his voice to present his perspective to everyone. At that moment, the two villains were gravely injured, and in that state, they couldn't have tracked him home. Even if they could, they wouldn't have risked appearing to kill his father. Amidst the sorrow, Eumenes brought his deductions to light. Yet Heg adamantly insisted that by the time he and his subordinates arrived, his father had already been slain by the bloodsucker. This was clearly at odds with Eumenes' assertions. If that were the case, then only one possibility remained. Heg was lying, and the reason for his deceit was all too simple. The true mastermind behind his father's death was none other than Heg himself. The bloodsucker was merely the sacrificial lamb he had prepared. Eumenes felt a deep sense of regret. After all, I was the one who tipped Heg off about the whereabouts of those two Shisha that fateful night. Perhaps Heg had been waiting for the perfect opportunity to usurp his father and execute his sinister plot. Everything seemed to fall into place for his scheme. My father had just passed away while confronting the inquiries of the Eumenes court. Yet, Eumenes presented his arguments with clarity, fiercely debating against Heg, who stood firmly on the opposing side. Suppose the bloodsucker, in an unprecedented rage, had transcended the limits of humanity and followed me home. Surely there would be traces of blood left in his wake. But not a single mark remains. This reveals that he was brought to our house after he had already met his demise. Heg's testimony is far from reliable. I hope you can send someone to thoroughly investigate the scene and gather more statements from witnesses. While Eumenes' words hold weight, in the end, they are merely the words of a child. The responsible adults have not taken Heg too seriously. Heg knows well that Eumenes is a clever one. Yet, I never imagined that in such dire circumstances he could maintain his composure. Confronting his own inner self, he quickly recognized his vulnerabilities. Deep down, he silently altered his original plan. Initially, he believed his intelligence would shine through, but perhaps it would be wiser to abandon that notion entirely. I cannot let this child hinder me any longer. Hajduk no longer emphasized the truth of his own story. Instead, he quietly awaited any question that might arise. Why, after discovering the vampire, did the child not alert the guards immediately? This was the dilemma that Eumenes could not escape, for he truly had no reasonable explanation to offer. After all, he could not openly confess to those in the courtroom that he felt sympathy for the merchant of death. At that moment, he was gravely injured, and he believed that if left alone, that wretch would soon meet his end. Yet the child, on the other hand, was a ruthless serial killer. Why do you still show him such respect? Is it your dream to become the protagonist in a tragic play? Hajduk waited for the right moment, but before Eumenes could respond, he interjected. That day in the square, many had gathered, all witnessing the gruesome spectacle of the two bloodsuckers wreaking havoc. Yet he did not lay a finger on a single child. That monster is you, Eumenes. Surely everyone has heard of the events that transpired that day, but do you truly understand why? Perhaps it was an innate connection that exists among those of the same bloodline. After all, both of you are creatures of the night, are you not? What then drew the attention of the guards? Oh, Hegtaios paused for a moment, then continued. Eumenes is not the biological child of the city lord. About 10 years ago, the old man led a merchant caravan on a distant journey, and upon returning to the city, he encountered a group of bloodsuckers. This child was taken in at that fateful time. As for the specific reasons, I am not entirely sure, but it is said that the child's biological mother was as ferocious as the blood-sucking slaves. Hegtaios' words seemed to resonate with an otherworldly power, shaking the very foundations of the earth. Eumenes felt the world around him tremble, and there was no denying it. That was the dream that had been replayed countless times on the cold, desolate bed. It turned out it was not merely a dream. The mighty warrior had ultimately perished in the form of a vibrant rainbow, and it was very likely that it was his own biological mother. Eumenes had always believed he could stand against Hegtaios to the bitter end, but upon realizing this truth, his mind felt as if it was exploding. His body felt as though it no longer belonged to him. The familiar world before his eyes suddenly crumbled. The blind child, who should have only endured the indignity of his presence at the trial, was already showing a semblance of respect. Yet, this child had woven countless lies to protect his kin. His testimony was completely unreliable. After all, Eumenes was merely an ordinary young master. He could not fathom how those filthy adults could resort to such underhanded tactics, disregarding the logic of events and directly attacking their opponents. In fact, around 200-300 years later, stories fabricated to attack opponents became known to any child among the nobility, not because Eumenes was not smart enough, but because of his relatively superior living environment where he never lost his innocence. In this situation, a normal child may quickly feel confused and lose the ability to resist, but Emily S. was not caught up in the vortex, only shifted her attention to non-existent bloodstains and time conflicts. It should be explained that Hyde silently sighed that this child was indeed extraordinary, but fate had already been decided. Once Emily S.'s vampire identity was exposed, it would determine the outcome of the trial. It cannot be fair and objective. Without a doubt, everyone wants to believe in Hyde's version. After Mr. Hyde's death, this case was finally resolved. Falling in love with Minnie S., she returned to her identity as an attempt to be detained and underwent a period of retraining. Her brother didn't like him, so naturally he wouldn't help her. Emily S. is not your husband's biological son because he was being followed and hurt. In sadness, it's hard for you to stand by Emily S. Regarding Hyde, he plans to sell Emily S. To fully exploit the last vestiges of his value, it was first to satisfy the insatiable curiosity that had been following him for some time, then to seizing the wicked opportunity to reveal his circumstances to the outside world. His unfortunate plight can be said to be entirely the result of these two hands. Eumenes was undoubtedly filled with regret and anger. However, his feelings encompassed more than just remorse and rage. The Yero clan had crafted an unparalleled environment for him in the world of commerce, and Eumenes could sense that. He could feel the affection his foster parents had for him. The elder aimed to nurture him not out of deceit, but with a blend of hatred and kindness. Eumenes and Thofun shared a bond forged in suffering. Through this ordeal, Eumenes ultimately gleaned an understanding. Why could someone like him, who had never set foot on a battlefield, defeat those stronger than him? Why did the elder wish for him to support his brother in the future? And why did the lady favor him over others? Hegtaios had slain the elder, destroying everything he held dear. Undoubtedly, he was his enemy. Yet, his biological parents could very well have met their demise at the hands of the elder. If that were the case, Hegtaios' act of slaying the elder could become an act of vengeance for him. Ultimately, who was truly the enemy, and who was the benefactor? Everything had become an intricate web of confusion, leaving Eumenes in a relentless spiral of contemplation. How should I accept all of this? The only certainty is that with my current strength, I remain powerless to alter the course of events. Beyond quietly accepting my present situation, I have no other survival strategies left. I stand face to face with the harsh reality of my fate. In just one night, I lost my refuge. Even the room that once belonged to me is now off limits. Eumenes had no choice but to seek shelter in Karang's room. Although Karang had his own space, he was a diligent worker, burdened by pressures that surpassed even the likes of 007, often stealing only a few hours of sleep. Now, with the added responsibility of a child. Within those walls, the child wept incessantly. As Eumenes transformed from a pampered prince, Karang felt no need for pretense any longer. He raised his voice, scolding Eumenes, even refusing his pleas for a blanket. Yet when he saw the child crumpled on the cold floor, a pang of compassion pierced his heart. Karang sighed, turning away to gently drape a blanket over Eumenes. After all, he was someone who cared for even the slaves and never ordered his young master around without reason. In this trying moment, the strength sustaining Eumenes was the tale of Odysseus, not through divine power, but by the wisdom that triumphed over every challenge. Eumenes recognized that his situation mirrored his past. Without contemplation, nothing could change. If Heike was in no rush to cast him aside, it meant he still held some value, a thread of usefulness. As long as he did not make unreasonable demands, Heike would likely refrain from intervening. Indeed, Eumenes found himself fortunate to have received a bed set, and even the servants willingly brought him books, a gesture of unexpected kindness. Although the slaves and servants no longer treated him with the same formality as before, none sought to make his life difficult. It seemed that not everything had changed solely due to his altered status. In the past, Eumenes had always been generous to others now. In his moment of hardship, he found kindness returned to him. The seeds he had sown in the past were now blooming into a rich harvest of goodwill. Eumenes even managed to obtain a small piece of wood and a carving knife from the servants. With nothing left in his possession, he relied solely on his hands to craft a birthday gift for his beloved little girlfriend. To his surprise, his crafting skills proved to be quite impressive. This young boy was indeed a versatile warrior. Yet a simple pendant was not enough. Karang seemed to recall something and rummaged through the cabinet, producing a necklace. This necklace had been discovered among the belongings of his mother. She had secretly hidden it away, hoping to one day present it to her child. Eumenes was taken aback, staring intently at the necklace, struggling to remember, yet unable to recall any further details. Karang understood that Eumenes would eventually have to leave, and knowing his insatiable curiosity about the events of that fateful year, he seized this moment to share what he knew. Back then, the old master, much like the formidable Lord Kuang, led a convoy to Ceres to procure agricultural goods. However, that expedition yielded little and felt somewhat wasted. The team in the city split into two groups. The old master commanded the front, while the rear group, hindered by the unstable situation, lagged significantly behind. At that moment, they stumbled upon 4 bloodsuckers. 2 men, a woman, and a small child. The leader of the rear group saw this as a golden opportunity to claim a few lives and salvage their expedition. Yet things did not unfold as planned. They faced fierce resistance from the adversaries. The 2 men, unable to hold their ground, were swiftly dispatched. Perhaps among them was the father of the child. The remaining woman, filled with rage, confronted our warriors with a mastery of swordsmanship that was on an entirely different level. One by one, they fell before her. Ultimately, we paid a heavy toll of 21 lives to bring her down. After her demise, the sole survivor discovered a child hidden among their belongings and brought it forth to report to the old master. Upon learning of the devastating losses in the rear group, the old master was naturally taken aback. However, rather than offering praise, his concern shifted to the child, who was staring intently into his eyes. Not a single tear fell. The elder seemed to sense something profound, compelling him to immediately take you to meet your mother, despite your fragile state. I had protested at that moment, but the elder paid no heed. The outcome was devastating once he witnessed the horrific scene before him. One of the survivors discovered you among the belongings and brought you to the vanguard to report to the elder. Upon learning of the heavy losses sustained by the army, he was deeply shaken. Yet, instead of worrying about the dire situation, his concern shifted to your reaction. for you were fixated solely on his face. Not a tear was shed. The elder seemed to grasp something intense and immediately resolved to take you to see your mother's remains. I voiced my objections, but the elder remained resolute. The result was heart-wrenching as he confronted that tragic sight. You maintained your icy facade. The elder believed you were no ordinary child. He thought you carried within you the blood of a hero. He resolved to adopt you, nurturing you to become the guardian deity of the Yarrow clan in the future. The image you had always dreamed of suddenly felt closer than ever. I suspect it was because you had witnessed the entire tragedy unfold. Though you were hidden away, perhaps your strange reaction was merely a survival instinct. Eumenes finally understood. The elder's assertion that you did not cry was true, especially at that moment. In truth, much of what transpired that day was lost to Eumenes. Upon returning home, the master immediately sought out the lady, insisting that she raise the child as her own. Initially, she strongly opposed, but when she saw Eumenes gripping her garment, tears streaming down his cheeks like rain, her heart softened. She embraced him tightly, her resolve melting away. Eumenes was not devoid of tears. He had simply held on to his composure until this moment. Charon knew well that he would never deceive himself, which meant that the death of his master and his biological parents was, in fact, not directly connected. Thus, he felt compelled to express gratitude for the kindness shown by his master and the lady. In truth, at that time, he felt no sorrow for the passing of his true parents. Even now, he must apologize to them. Not long after, Hegtaios found a suitable buyer for Eumenes. As the flames of chaos were extinguished, the secret of the necklace that Eumenes had hidden was laid bare. Refusing to surrender it, he was compelled to duel with Hegtaios. Fortunately, the buyer paid little heed to these details. They were thoroughly impressed by Eumenes' abilities. Hegtaios had two reasons to justify his exorbitant price. He claimed a portion of the funds was needed to compensate the Yi people who had suffered at the hands of Eumenes' mother in years past. Moreover, due to the recent massacre caused by the bloodsuckers in the city, he also needed to send condolence money to the families of the victims. Of course, Hegtaios understood that business was not charity, and the buyer had no reason to consider the seller, accepting high prices without question. Thus, he cleverly added an enhanced service to this transaction, promising to honor his compensatory efforts by erecting a stone monument in the most prominent location in the eastern square, while also commissioning a sculptor to ensure the buyer's visage appeared even more handsome. Indeed, Hegtaios was no ordinary man. This proposal was even more enticing than he had imagined. Ultimately, the buyer decided to proceed with the deal at twice the original price. The monument increased from 1 to 3, while the relief simply needed to be restored as closely to reality as possible without any embellishments. The new owner of Eumenes appeared to be a generous soul. The transaction concluded smoothly, and Hegtaios' spirit soared. He expressed his lingering fondness for Eumenes. No more pretense. Was it not you who had slain his mother? Even now, you wish to shirk responsibility. Why do you still bother with this matter? If not for the master, your biological parents might have survived. Was he not your foe? Over the years, the master had committed many vile deeds. Such a fate was merely his destiny. How thrilling it is to anticipate the conclusion, what fate awaits you, because of your actions. After a heated exchange, Hegtaios couldn't help but marvel at this child. He was truly extraordinary. But it matters not, for I am certain your deeds shall never be forgiven. Under his reign you shall find no peace. Indeed, Hegtaios had invested significant effort to secure this buyer. He had meticulously calculated Eumenes' future, yet in hundreds of scenarios, he could never have foreseen that Eumenes would one day. With a new identity, Eumenes returned to Cartier, now bound by the will of others. 2 days later, the moment of parting had arrived. Just before stepping through the Yarrow gate, Eumenes suddenly paused. Charon, in charge of the handover, instantly grasped the situation and requested a bit more time from the partners. Beneath the grand stone bridge, in the expansive courtyard before his window, every corner bore the imprint of his existence. How could he have been deceived for so long? Eumenes suddenly cried out, his voice echoing through the house, cascading into the backyard, resonating throughout Yarrow New Roga. Why is it so clear? Yet Eumenes fell silent. He merely repeated his previous words, yet what he truly wished to convey was understood by all his family. It was evident he cared deeply for them, always considering them as kin. The boy had witnessed his mother's death without shedding a tear, and now only regret remained. Many years have passed, knowing that I would forever leave this home, yet I could not hold back the tears. Perhaps these were the tears long since dried up. From that moment on, no matter how desperate the situation, Eumenes would not cry again as the figure of the young master gradually faded away into the distance. Disappearing beyond the horizon, the woman slowly approached the door. For her, the one who always regarded the other as family, it was not just her alone. The time spent together, filled with emotions forged during their days side by side, created a bond that transcended bloodlines. Not everything is a deception. Everyone awaits the ship's departure at the harbor. Eumenes realized that Karong had followed her here. Karong expressed he had something to announce to Eumenes. Though you have become someone who strives, in the future, you may encounter experiences that make life feel more worthwhile. But you must never give up. As long as you persevere, you will surely reclaim your freedom. You have that potential within you. Remember, no matter what happens, never lose hope. After receiving Eumenes' response, Karong left with a wish for her peace, then turned and walked away. In Eumenes' mind, Karong had always been a cold, serious individual. Yet today, for reasons unknown, he seemed somewhat moved. After bidding farewell to Karong, Eumenes noticed a few small friends standing at the door to see her off. The little girl held a necklace she had crafted herself. This proves that Karong helped her send off a gift. In this moment of awkwardness, she truly wishes her friends wouldn't see. Yet despite her words, Eumenes understands that she must bid farewell in a complete manner. In summary, everyone, take care. Eumenes strives to speak with a calm tone to describe this parting. However, her friends are still too immature to provide a fitting response. On the way back, Nick, with his unwavering strength, voiced the feelings held within everyone. Even though he has become a slave, he will always remain my friend. Eumenes didn't hear their responses, but she was certain that those words had been conveyed. Compared to her brothers, the mood of the young girl was even more tumultuous. She clutched the necklace tightly, wanting to throw it into the sea. After being stopped by everyone, she bowed her head and ran away. Was it anger, regret, or sorrow? From her silhouette, we could not tell. Finally, the ship has set sail. Karong, who bid farewell to Eumenes, stood afar, watching his figure fade away. The words he longed to express still remained unspoken. What they had shared was not the entire truth, Eumenes. Your mother did not lose to us. The reason she stopped the moment she saw you was because the enemy had found the child she hid and placed a blade to its throat. And that person is the one who will accompany you throughout your life, witnessing your growth. The reason he ultimately lacked the courage to speak was that this truth was far too brutal for the man. Oh. In the haunting memories of Eumenes' mother, she never uttered a single word. Here the author refrains from any dialogue, instead employing 6 poignant expressions to vividly convey the emotional shifts of Eumenes' mother. Surprise, outrage, despair, and then sorrow. These turbulent waves of emotion gradually settle into a serene calm in the final moments. For the mother had prepared a reassuring expression to comfort her child in the last fleeting seconds of her life. As a comic artist born in the 60s, Yan Mingjin's work truly encapsulates the essence of its era. His drawing techniques may not be exceptional, and the images and settings appear rather ordinary. Technically, it does not resemble the dramatic flair and powerful effects that many young artists pursue today. Thus, the visuals may lack the coolness or beauty often sought after, yet they possess a simplicity that is refreshing. Nevertheless, this does not diminish the value of the series. The distant landscapes are never compromised. The details within the imagery are rich and vibrant. The close-ups resonate with the landscapes, accurately portraying the characters' emotions with a profound impact. Because this work is an adaptation from a true historical narrative, the author has invested immense effort to recreate the humanity and ecology of ancient Greece. He mentioned later that every time he published a single volume, he dedicated an immense amount of time to editing and refining it. Such a devoted work ethic commands deep respect. Naturally, all these efforts serve to enhance the narrative, illuminating the beauty of the characters. Throughout the entire tale, what impresses me the most is the portrayal of Eumenes. From various situations, it is evident that Eumenes is indeed a person of remarkable composure. So calm that he seems almost motionless. No matter how fierce the storm rages outside, it is nearly impossible to disturb the calm waters of his heart. Whether faced with violence, deceit, treachery, or even death, he maintains his serenity. Yet, this does not imply that Eumenes is devoid of feelings. He simply buries his emotions deep within. I cannot fathom how Eumenes would dramatically proclaim his friendship, charging forward to declare, "I have returned. Everything that belongs to me shall be reclaimed this time." Instead, I am struck by his genuine and restrained demeanor. Even when despair looms large, Eumenes adapts to every circumstance. He does not lament his reality, rather, he seeks every possible way to effect change. He prioritizes his own protection. As for enemies he cannot surpass, or vendettas yet to be settled, he buries them within, awaiting the opportune moment for them to sprout. In the subsequent narrative, we shall witness he prioritizes his own protection, while those enemies he cannot confront, or the grudges yet to be avenged, he buries deep within, waiting for the right moment to let them take root and blossom. In the next chapter, we shall witness how Eumenes escaped the shackles of slavery to be reborn, facing trials that threaten to obliterate his newfound life. We will observe the ways in which he employs his intellect and courage to transform peril into safety, as well as how he relies on his superior knowledge. With an uncanny ability to perceive the essence of events, he seizes pivotal opportunities. Ultimately, he steps into the heart of power in the ancient world of Greece. Together, we will bear witness to Eumenes' transformation from a mere observer of history into an active participant in its unfolding. In the end, he becomes a part of history itself. Throughout this journey, Eumenes matures gradually. However, the price of his growth is steep. It may involve compromises contrary to his desires, painful separations, or a lifetime of distance from those he loves. This is the tale of the Eye of History, depicting the tumultuous life of Menesi. Thus, the first chapter of this video series reaches its conclusion. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all of you for your patience in following along until this point. At the same time, I want to remind myself that you have also put in a tremendous effort. Over 40 minutes of video and around 15,000 words of script is truly no small feat for those who speak Mandarin. Just how many can patiently endure a video that delves into the intricacies of historical manga? To be honest, my confidence is wavering. Therefore, in this video, I would like to ask for your assistance. I find myself torn about continuing to narrate such historical tales. So I leave it in your hands, those who wish to see the next chapter. Please let me know in the comments. If many of you express interest, I will carry on sharing this story with you until the very end. And if you find it less engaging, that's perfectly all right. The journey of stories will continue, simply returning to the works recommended by Mei Z. So let's make that decision together. I sincerely thank all of you for joining me here. This video concludes here. I am your narrator, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.